So good afternoon, everyone. This is Shreya. I am a co-team member. Welcome to the Python series day 3. We will be discussing about functions, loops, and installing of packages today. So let's get started. Yeah, so functions. So basically Python functions are a block of code. It's a block of code that can be reused. It's a subprogram that acts on data and returns a value. So you can either print a value out or return a value which can be later on used. So there are three types of functions: built-in functions, functions defined in modules like random, math, and many other, and user-defined functions, which will be made by the user. So built-in functions are always predefined and ready for using. Some of the common examples are the function, which gives us the length of a string or a list or a dictionary. Then you have the functions which are inside modules like rand, int, sign. So these give you the particular value. For this, you will have to import the module before. So moving on to user-defined functions. So one of the most common, let's understand the structure of a user-defined function first. We will be working on hands-on for user-defined functions today. So first of all, every user-defined function starts with the keyword def. So after that comes the function name, which is used to call the function. And then we have inside the parenthesis, the parameters on which your function will be worked on, the values. After the colon, we will be having the body of the function where the mathematical part is involved. And finally, we will be returning the function with the return word. So we can reuse this function by calling the function name over and over. You can see a few examples on the right side. So it takes in the parameters A and B, it adds them up inside the body and returns the value. You can also just remove the V1 is equal to A plus B and directly write return A plus B. It will still return you the sum. Another example is loops inside function, if and else, conditional statements inside a function, where it takes in two values, two parameters A and B. And if A is greater than B, it returns A, else it returns B. So it returns the larger number. Okay, let's go to a hands-on session on Python. So we can see a similar example as the one I've shown. It takes in the value and directly I've just added it here instead of taking a different variable. And you can also use function without parameters. You can just directly call, and it will still run the same program because it returns. Now, if we change the same program and make it print instead of return, we can then remove this variable and the print statement, and it will still run the same way, as you can see. So now let's try exercise where you are asked to write a function to find the square area of a square or rectangle using user inputs. So we can code together. Let's take the user input as user input, and you can maybe write a value where if it's 0, it's a square, or if it's a 1, it's a rectangle. So now this int and input, they are built-in functions which are taking in the value. Let's make the function above first. Square or rectangle. Now this takes in the user input. Let's maybe name the user input as just U right now. And if U zero, then you can make, so if the user input is 0, which is a square, you will be asking them for the side. To find the area, and once you get the side, you print out formula of a square, which is side into side. Else, if it is not a square, it's a rectangle, you can just use else, or you can use an elif, up to you, and ask for the length which takes the length and a breadth, which takes the value of the breadth. And once you get that, you can just print out the area of the rectangle using the formula. So now it's directly printing out the value. If you want, you can use return statement, but you will have to call a variable here to print it out. So instead, we have directly printed. Now you can just call the function with your user input. So this parameter has to be the one which you have called outside the function. It cannot be the same one inside the function. It can be, but you also have to change the value here to the same one as here. Now, if we run this, so let's say I want to calculate the value area of a square, and let's say it's of size 16 centimeter, and you get your answer. Similarly, for area of a rectangle, it says 15 and 5, you get your answer. So this is how you find the area of a square or rectangle using user inputs. So now if we go into a little more complicated answers, we're using a for loop. I'm sure you've learned about for loop and while loop in your previous session on day 2. You can see how you can use for loop inside the function to get the same whatever answer you wish to. So you take a user input in this function and you call the function using this user input, and it prints out the table from 1 to 10 because the range is left till 11. So last number is not counted. So last but one number, and you print it out the way you want it to. Another example is taking a string and then converting it into a list of strings. So you take in your user input, the string. Here we don't use int because it only takes integers. We take the input as a string in input and we save it as user input. Call the function string to list, which then calls the list. And then here, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but for I in string, it calls each value in the string. So if the string is hello world, it calls for I in string calls out first H, then H is appended to the list, and then E, and then E is appended to the list, and similarly, each one of them. And you can run it. Let's change the string to maybe Python series day 3. So here you'll see that even the space between the strings, between Python and series, is also considered as a character. So similarly, hyphen is also considered. Yes, now moving back to the presentation. Yeah, so loops, let's just take it as a revision for loops. So for and while loop you have already covered, but we have just kept more examples so you guys can get more comfortable with how the looping is working. You also have for loop is iterating over a sequence and while is executing as long as the condition is true. So for while loop, the condition is more important, but for is just a sequence or a range. So for loop, you can see a few examples where you can use for with if, for else is also there. You can use continue and break, which breaks it. This just continues if that word matches. This breaks out of the loop. And else, if the for work, once the for is done, it will go to else and then it will print. So similarly in while loop, there are more examples for with break statement, continue statement, and else inside while loop. So now let's moving on to dependencies. So pip is the package installer for Python. So if you want to install those modules or libraries that are not part of the standard library, you have to call the pip function and then install. But pip has to be installed first if it's not already there in your system. So you have to install it and add it to your path. You can use these two commands, the ensure pip. There are also examples next to it. Python get pip.py and the Python underscore space hyphen m ensure pip space hyphen upgrade. So this the upgrade function upgrades and the get pip first gets you the pip package. After once you're done installing pip, you have to then move on to installing the package that you want. So a common example when you're on your command window, the terminal, you can just type in pip install whichever package, pandas, numpy. But inside Jupyter notebook, you have to use the exclamatory mark and then write pip install the name of your package. You can also use, this is using the exclamation pip installer. You could also use the sys library, where the syntax is as follows. And you have to import the sys module first, library first, and then write exclamation curly braces sys dot executable closing of your braces -m pip install name of the package. So you need pip, but there are two different ways of installing. So let's try one of these. Yes. So I already have it installed, but we could still learn from it. Pandas. And then you run it. So it takes a while. And since I already have it installed, you can see requirement already satisfied. Yeah, so that's all. Okay, guys, thank you so much.